because we are all dealing with psychology all the time. You know, your mental state is a psychology. You have a psyche that's there, and you're dealing with that all the time. Not only are you dealing with that all the time, but it is really the base of operation. You're living from your brain, and you're living from the psychology in terms of who you consider yourself to be. That's psychology. Who you consider yourself to be, what your personal story is, what happened to you since you've been born that caused you to go crazy, you know, all of it, right, is your psychology. And unless you wake up in such a way where you can see that psychology, you're stuck operating as that psychology, and so you can't kind of get out of it because you're stuck in a system. All the thinking that goes on in the system comes from the system. You can't get out of the system. So meditation is a way of getting out of the system, getting out of the thought system, to start to discover that awareness is not in the system. The awareness is awareness of the system, but it's not in the system, which means that if you practice meditation, you can start to look at your own mind. You can start to look at your own thought process. You can start to look at your emotions. You can start to look at your behavior in a realistic way, with a brutally honest way of seeing it in terms of, is my life really working? Is who I'm being really working? Are the thoughts that I entertain all day long and identify myself with, are they really working? Are they producing a life worth living? Are they producing a state of well-being? And what I mean by a state of well-being is, do I find myself living a life that is the life that I want to live? Do I find myself living a life in which I could say I'm happy? Do I find myself living a life in which I can say that I am at peace? Can I say that I am satisfied? Is my life workable? If it's not, and for most of us it's not, then meditation is an opportunity to start to pay attention in a way where you can see what's not working, and you can start to remove your energy from that activity. You know, that's what you're doing when you move your attention from thinking to paying attention to the breath. You're removing your attention from that activity. One of the exercises that a meditation teacher does sometimes is, says to people, think of something that's troubling to you. That's not hard to do for most of us, right? Think of something that bothers you, that's annoying to you, that's disturbing to you, that's upsetting to you. Think about that for a while. And then once you start to think about that, you begin to see the system in operation. The thoughts start to generate emotions, and now you're in a mental state, you're in an emotional state. It's an uncomfortable state that you don't like being in. It's a crazy state, because when you're in that state, you do things that are destructive. When you're in that state, you're not able to function well, right? So if you spend some time allowing yourself to be annoyed and to experience something that really bothers you, and then switch and start to follow your breath and pay attention to your breath, following it all the way out and all the way in, staying with it the entire time, all the way out and all the way in. And you do that for a few minutes. And then ask yourself a question. When I was doing the following the breath, was I annoyed or upset the way I was when I was thinking about what was annoying and upsetting? And if you do the exercise correctly, the answer is no. You can't be upset and emotionally disturbed if your attention is not involved in that activity and your attention is following the breath. So this is an important discovery. You can realize, wait a minute, I have the ability to not be upset. I have the ability to not suffer the condition that I find myself living in when I identify with the thoughts in my mind, when that's running the show. You know, I have the ability to get free from that. I have the ability to reboot the system. I have the ability to hack the brain. I have the ability to discover and realize a possibility of well-being that would not otherwise be available to me if I just continue to be in the mental state like most of us are, and continue to be in the emotional state, the mental state, You have to remember that the conditioning we've been exposed to in this world, in this society, you know, if we're going to be brutally honest about it, the conditioning we've been exposed to is a sick conditioning. It's a sick state of mind. You know, when you look at the news, it's pretty obvious that, you know, something is amiss here. You know, that we haven't gotten beyond the reactive state. In other words, if you kill my people, I'm going to kill your people. You know, most of us, if you stop and look, is an eye for an eye. Does that make sense? Is that a very intelligent? Is that a very awake way to look at reality? An eye for an eye. That if you're crazy, I'll just be crazy too. If you look at that, you can see that that is insane. That doesn't work. But even though it's insane and it doesn't work, it is the way people are. It is the way the world is. It is what's happening, not only in Israel and Gaza, it's happening in our own neighborhoods. It's happening in our own homes, happening in our own minds, that we're in conflict with ourselves, aren't we? Don't you have upset about you? Don't you have thoughts about you? About your, you know, about what you did that you feel guilty about, or what you're ashamed of? You know, or don't you have thoughts, conflicting thoughts about your life, about your relationships with your parents and your children and your wife, and even yourself? You know, when most of us can't look in the mirror for very long. I mean, you can look in the mirror if you're just, you know, doing your hair and all that, but if you look in the mirror and you're really looking at who's in the mirror, you can't stay long. You know what I mean? It's too disturbing to look into those eyes and see what's going on there, right? So meditation can get you to a place where you can actually look in the mirror and be satisfied and be happy and be relaxed and be calm, you know. Because what you're looking at is not a state of mind anymore, you're looking at a state of being. You're looking into the eyes of something that is alive, well, fulfilled, happy and satisfied. And the only place that's ever available is in the present moment. It's not going to happen in the world, and it's not going to happen in time. And so through meditation, you can discover a natural state in which you're already happy, satisfied, and peaceful. And once you establish that, and that can be a consistent experience you're having, then your life is different because you're not trying to get it. You're not trying to get that anymore from other people, and you're not trying to get that from life. You're not trying to get that from the world. You already have that. Now you can enjoy being alive instead of pursuing happiness. Pursuing happiness is a dead end. You know, it's you know, every time I think about this, it makes me laugh, because we're proud of the fact that in this country, we're guaranteed the right to pursue happiness, right? But nobody stops to look at it seriously and realize, wait a minute, how about instead of pursuing happiness, how about being happy? You know, how about if we're guaranteed the right to be happy? That's a different story, right? And if you're guaranteed the right to be happy, then in the system that we're in, the society that we're in, would educate us about what it takes to be happy instead of what it takes to pursue it. The way it is now, it's what it takes to pursue it, right? Make more money, right? You do all the things that you think in the thought process will make you happy. Get what you want, that'll make you happy. Find the right person to love, that'll make you happy. Get the right job, that'll make you happy. Buy a new car, that'll make you happy. So the setup is an in-the-world process in which everybody out there is trying to make money off your pursuit of happiness. And the thing about it that makes the system, the economic system work, is it's guaranteed that you'll never succeed. So you'll be back. You know, if you buy a new car, you'll be back to buy another new car, you know. It's a never-ending process. Everything that you get once you get it doesn't have the same excitement that you thought about it would have when you were imagining it. It might for just a little bit of time, right? This is interesting. It's important to pay attention. If you get a new car, for example, you know, right when you get the car, right, you may feel, okay, this is happiness. This must be happiness, right? Because I feel like the car is exciting, you know, it changes the way people see me. You know, it gives me more gadgets to play with, especially now in the cars. You know, you're driving a computer, for Christ's sake. So that's the way it goes. And if you really pay attention at that time, you realize, okay, even the second day of having the car isn't as good as the first day. And a week later, it's clearly not the same as it was the day I got the car. And then 6 months later, it's irrelevant. I'm already chasing something else. You know, the car is irrelevant. This is the way the mind works. It's a never-ending pursuit of happiness. It's a never-ending process of experiencing dissatisfaction, chasing what you think will resolve it, getting it, and then losing that again and experience dissatisfaction again, over and over and over again. And you would think that at some point, people would like wake up and realize this isn't working. But they don't even have time to step back and look at it to see if it's working, because the commercials are coming at you so fast, that if you just go out there and look at the TV, when I'm out there working out, I look at the TV, it's like they're bombarding you with, know this, know this, know this, know this, get that. This will solve this problem, this will solve that problem, this will make you feel better, this will give you better health, this will give you more money. And so they just keep coming as fast as possible with things. And we live in a society, as I often say in this class, we live in a society and we live in a world in which everybody's insane, so nobody's insane. If we're all crazy, nobody's crazy, right? So if you start to meditate, you'll start to wake up and realize just because everybody else is crazy, that doesn't mean you have to continue to be crazy. You can start to experience a different way of being. You can start to experience a different way of living your life. That works, in which you can actually experience happiness, well-being, peace of mind, and fulfillment. And that's a good idea, because the teachings that go along with these practices, well, there's two fundamental aspects, two fundamental teachings that go along with this. The one teaching is called impermanence. And what that teaching is it's telling you that everything is constantly changing, nothing ever stops changing. It's called impermanence, right? And because that's the case, we suffer. We suffer because nothing ever stops changing. Our body keeps getting older, right? You have to keep adjusting to what's going on circumstantially in the world and in your life and in your family. It's constantly changing. Your body's changing, your mind's changing, everything's constantly changing. So that's impermanence. And then the other aspect of impermanence is your life. The lifespan is an impermanent reality. You will be here for a specific period of time, and that period of time is very temporary and very short compared to time in general, isn't it? If you're older, when you get older, you realize that you didn't have the time you thought you had. It went by very quickly, right? So impermanence and the truth about the length of life that we have to live, right, is one teaching. It's an important thing to realize so you don't waste time, so you don't take anything for granted. You realize this life that you have is an opportunity to experience well-being, but if you don't do what it takes to experience that, your life will go by, you'll suffer and die. Sorry, that's the way it works, okay? So impermanence is one teaching. The other teaching is the teaching of what's called no self. Right? These are the two primary teachings that come from the East. The teaching of no self simply means that you are not who you think you are. You live the life. If I ask you your name, and then I ask you, tell me about yourself, you'll tell me your name, you'll tell me a story about you, and that's your life. That's your personality, and that's your life. And you're living as that all the time. You're living as that. You identify yourself as a physical body, and you identify yourself as a personality. And that personality has all different kinds of aspects to it in terms of your nationality, who your parents were, and all the rest of it, right? And that's what you're living from. That's the life that you're living. The only problem is that is what they call in Buddhism, the life of a ghost, a hungry ghost. It's the life of a hungry ghost, because you will never be satisfied, number one, and you don't actually exist, number two. Your personality is something that you learned. It's obvious that that's the case, because if you had a head injury and you lost your memory, you wouldn't know who you are. So your personality is something you have to remember who you are. So how real is it? How authentic is it? How true is it that you're what you really are if you have to remember it? And when you don't know who you are, if you did have a head injury and you had total amnesia, right, and you don't know who you are, right, you would still be here. You just wouldn't know who you were. So maybe that which is still here is really you, not what you learned to be. Do you follow that? If you lost your memory, you would still be here. People that have amnesia are still here. They're still aware. They just don't know who they are. Well, maybe that's your natural state. Maybe that's who you really are, is the state of awareness that's there even when you don't know the details, even when you don't know your name. And through meditation, You can discover that is your true nature and start to experience what it would be like to live your life from there instead of living your life from the personality. You live your life from a personality, and the personality goes off the rails sufficiently, and you have to get into psychotherapy and take medication. Say from the Zen point of view, but you could also say from the truth. From the truth. Because if you look at it, the father and the mother, right, their energy is alive, right? The cells in their body are alive. The mother's cells are alive, the father's cells are alive, the sperm cell's alive, the egg is alive. They come together, so they're already alive. They come together, right, and then they start to create a new form of life, right? But nothing died and nothing was born. It was alive and continues to be alive, okay? Your birth happened when the baby gets sophisticated in its development enough to start to think, right? And start to learn to have an identity. That's when you actually showed up. That's when your life began. Before that, when you were an infant and you didn't have language, you didn't have an identity, you didn't have a name, you didn't even know in the very beginning when you came out of your mother, you didn't even know in the very beginning that you were separate from everything else. You didn't know your body was separate from the rest of the world. So once you get a name, once you say mama and daddy, and they tell you your name and everything, that's the beginning of your life.
The life of the personality.
The life of the personality. And that's what's afraid of death. That's what's afraid of death, is the personality, because the personality believes it was born, and anything that is born must die. So the personality believes it was born, and therefore it will die. What the teachings tell us is there was no birth in reality. Life was alive. Life changed its form into the life of another human being, but there was no interruption of life. It was a continuation, right? Therefore, you could say your true nature is unborn, because there is no birth. The birth is only an identity that you took on for a brief period of time, and when the body dies, that dissolves along with the body and the state of mind. But if you study the teachings and you practice meditation, you can start to make contact with and realize and experience your true nature, which wasn't born and doesn't die. You know, that's one of the great teachers. Jesus Christ said, I offer you everlasting life. What did he mean? Well, what he meant was the truth is you weren't born and you're not going to die. That's everlasting life. That's right. That's right. The title of my book is Dying to Live. Yeah? And what a lot of the ancient teachings tell us is once you see things as they actually are, don't wait for the death of the personality. Let it die now. It doesn't really exist anyway. You'll continue to have to operate as it, but that's just the game you're playing now. It's not true. That's a whole different experience. You know, to know that your personality is just something you're using to be in the world and, you know, operate in the world. You're just using it for that, but that's not your true nature. Your true nature is free. Your true nature wasn't born and won't die, and your true nature is free to be happy, satisfied, fulfilled, and at peace at all times. That's already your true nature. That's what meditation does, is allow you to make contact with what's already the case. And what's already the case is that you are already home. You don't have to try and get there. You're already happy. You don't have to pursue it. But the experience of that well-being and home and happiness isn't available to you when you're spending all your time thinking, because the thinking activity is coming from your conditioning, which has you be a body and a person. Well, Bob, you have to look at this in the context of the reality of time. In the reality of time, the evolutionary process that we're in, coming out of being an animal, becoming more sophisticated, right, is happening in a flash. You're in the process, so it looks like it's very slow, right, but it's happening very fast. And if it continues to go in that direction, there was a book written by a guy that was one of the founders of Esalen Institute called The Future of the Body. It was written about 30 years ago, but it really caught my attention, and I read the book. And he was saying, if we succeed, if this doesn't become an annihilation, right, and we succeed, and by the way, even if it doesn't become an annihilation, it will end. The sun will burn out. The earth will come to an end. This is not a permanent situation at all, right? It will change form, right? But there will be another universe, and it'll just keep going like that, right? If you understand this in terms of a more realistic perception of time, you realize if we succeed in this process, we will become disembodied entities because the body will become unnecessary. And we can live as conscious vibrations, right? Even in some of the teachings, they talk about the fact that even in the life that we're living now, that you can elevate your consciousness to the point where you're living in a vibratory state, right? Where you're living in another realm that's not physical, right? So the point of the whole thing is that this process that's going on is happening in a cause-effect way. It's happening. It's got its own evolutionary process that's occurring. And the idea that right now we're in this insane state is just part of the evolution. You know, if you look at coming out of being an animal and evolving to become an awake, sophisticated, conscious being, aware consciousness being, in that process there's going to be some rough time. When one foot is an animal and the other foot is conscious. Okay? Even in this process, if you practice meditation and you start to wake up and come out of your craziness, right? It'll be an off and on thing. You know, you'll do some crazy stuff and then you'll realize it was crazy and you'll be sane for a while and then you'll do some more crazy stuff. That's how the process goes. It's not like, you know, just switch and now that you're enlightened. No, that's not the case. It's a gradual process. And it's an uncomfortable process in the sense that you have to experience what it's like to see how crazy you are. You have to experience what it's like to be crazy and at times not be able to do anything about it and watch yourself doing crazy stuff that's going to cause nothing but suffering for you and everybody else. And that's not fun to watch. But that's part of what you have to go through, because if you watch that when it's happening, the sting of seeing it clearly will motivate you even more to stay awake like that.
Seems just so inconsistent that we've evolved so much in technology with smartphones and all of this technology we have, but spiritually we haven't evolved at all, it seems like.
Well, we've evolved, but nothing in comparison to the way we've evolved technologically. The brain with 100 billion neurons is the most sophisticated and powerful organism we're aware of in the entire universe. So its capability is even far beyond what we've done so far. But if all we do is use it to pursue happiness, it's going to take us to hell. It's already hell, but it's going to take us to a worse hell. Now that I've inspired you and you